Okay. Um, okay, so this is Rebecca Nash. It's 7:01, and I'm going to call the meeting to order. As far as roll call, it looks like well, Beth is excused. Ellen is excused or may come late. And I think we're still waiting on Barbara, but if you just want to mark her absent for now. We also have a couple guests. We have Sal. Is it Taco?
It's Taco.
Okay.
People try to second guess it, but it's Taco.
Okay, perfect. He's here from Janney Funds to give a presentation to us, and we also have Harry Pearson, who's on the investment subcommittee, joining us as well. We may have a couple other guests coming later, and I'm not sure. They haven't popped onto my screen yet, so I think that's what we have here. Okay, so Val, it looks like you're first up under citizens' comments.
I'm not bringing up the share screen, so I'm not going to try to do that.
Okay, so it's
yeah.
not working? Okay. Everyone has the presentation that was sent to us earlier in the week or month? Or the actual portfolio summary? Okay, all right, Sal, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Fantastic, and I really appreciate everyone allowing me to participate this evening. It's been quite some time. I'm Sal Taco from Janney Montgomery Scott. I've had the true fortune of working with the library now for, I think it's about 15 years. I've been with Janney for 9 years, and prior to that, I worked at Dime Bank for also 9 years, and that's where I commenced my relationship with the library. I think it was around 2006 when the library established the building fund. And even when we established that fund, the intention was that eventually I would lose the relationship because the intention was to use the building fund. And as you probably all know the story on how that goes. But if you received and looked through the portfolio summary, I'll go through that. And the way I operate is at any point in time, if there's any questions at all, don't wait, just interject and ask me the question. So I always like to start with the sort of the first inset page, which is page 2 of 10 of the portfolio summary. Hopefully everybody can open up to that page. This page is what we call the executive summary. For a lot of the libraries that I work with, this is a page that with some degree of frequency, investment committees, treasurers say, can you send me that page, every month or every quarter or, whatever degree of frequency, because it kind of encapsulates just how the portfolio is doing overall. So if you look at that page and you look in the upper right-hand corner, that kind of gives you a sort of a thumbnail as to how the library is doing overall. So you can see the since inception data, which is in the far upper right-hand corner, November 26, 2012. That was essentially when we moved what at that time was just the building fund from Dime Bank, my former employer, to my current employer. So that's the significance of that date. So that's when that first building fund moved. Since then, the overall portfolio has averaged, just south of about 6% per year. Moving just over year to date, which is through September 30th. I only did that date because this is a document that I provided to Kent, as I often did for Nancy Avery every year while I worked with her. We always did a September 30th ending report so that she could provide the report for the commission ultimately. Year to date, the portfolio was up 12.32%. So that kind of gives you an overall impression on how the assets have done both, year to date through September 30th and the since inception on an annualized basis. Upper left-hand corner just gives you an overall idea of the breakdown of the assets. So you can see roughly 8.3% of the assets at this time is in what we call cash or cash equivalents, essentially money market accounts. 55%, a little more than half of the assets, are in US equity or stock. 18% are in international or non-US equity. And about 18% of the library's assets are in fixed income. Any questions so far?
Just one question, Sal.
Yeah.
Um, The fixed income account,
Yep.
how comfortable are you with that account going forward in the, what I think everyone perceives as a rising interest rate environment?
Yeah, it's a
And-
great, it's a fantastic question because, and that's, when we look at the different accounts on the next page, we'll be talking about what fixed income is in this portfolio. The fixed income is strictly in the building fund and is strictly in exchange traded funds that are actively managed by a company called West End Advisors. And they can use anything from inflation protected, or TIP,
Mhm.
exchange traded funds. They can use short dated funds, long dated funds. They essentially are actively managing the fixed income portion using exchange traded funds. So they're not, buying individual bonds and holding them to maturity and hopefully they do well in a rising interest rate environment. They are actively managing a portfolio of exchange traded funds. And again, I'll elaborate on why there is such a high cash position, which of course earns next to zero, as well as, what is the composition of the fixed income on the next page, because I'll actually break out each account on how it's allocated.
Okay.
Lower left-hand corner is just the top 10 overall positions within the portfolio. So it just gives you an idea of what the largest positions are, most of which are exchange traded funds, essentially indexes. So they're not individual holdings. In fact, you don't get to the first individual holding until you reach Bank of America, which is about 2.4% of the library's total assets. What I'll do, if it's okay now, is, and again, I can be kind of long-winded and I don't really want to overstay my welcome. So if it's okay, we'll advance to the next page and I'll break out each individual account and give an explanation of kind of the history of each account and where we stand today. So if we go to the next page, page 3, this report always shows accounts in size order. So the first account is the William Holton Memorial Fund. And to give you some sort of background history on that account, as you can see, that account's inception date was November 23rd of 2016. That was when the account was set up. That's when I met with Nancy Avery and Gail, and we talked about the, charitable donations that were going to be given to us. So the account was opened then, but wasn't actually funded until April of 2017. That was when the assets came in. And at that time, it came in a very concentrated way. 40% of the total donation into that account was IBM. 14% was GE. 17% was Pfizer. 12% was Washington Trust, and about 17% in cash. And soon after all of those donations were contributed to that account in April, I met with Gail and I met with Nancy together, and we talked about what this account means long-term. What's the overall goal of this account? And the goal was to basically invest in a very defensively postured equity portfolio. And at that time, even at that time, the discussion was, well, where are we in the fixed income realm? And it was decided at that time that in lieu of holding bonds, we would basically allocate some money just to cash, because essentially what can bonds really yield in a low interest rate environment? So the reason why there's an elevated cash position is because we've kind of precluded the manager of that account That manager is Schaefer Cullen from buying bonds. So where they would normally allocate to bonds, they're allocating to cash or money market. And again, that's the manager we selected because they manage actively an individual portfolio of defensively oriented, high dividend yielding equity. So that who is managing the William Holton Memorial Fund. We reallocated those assets that came in April in June of 2017 and is currently in about 42 different equity or individual stock positions. Some of the top holdings, as I mentioned, was Bank of America, Medtronic, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Nextera, all dividend yielding equities. Those are some of the top holdings. As you can see, year to date, the portfolio with the William Holton Memorial Fund is up about 17%. That's through September 30th and about 30% over the last year. Bear in mind that that portfolio is about 90% individual equities and 10% in cash.
Sal, can I
Yeah,
ask you
Harry.
a quick question?
Yep.
I did go through the holdings that you had listed, your top holdings, and they
Yep.
do seem to pay dividends. Every single item seems to be a dividend payer in that list that was provided on page 2. Would you categorize the risk profile of this portfolio kind of a growth and income strategy?
Yes, definitely. And I mean that, these two managers, so the two active managers we're using, one was Schaefer Cullen, the next one we'll talk about, the building fund, is a manager called West End Advisors. They're both growth and income oriented managers. They're both managers that I use, not that I'm trying to, paint, Bill Library into a box, but they're the same two managers I use for a lot of the libraries I work with because they're cash flow generating. I mentioned to Gail that the Bill Library is kind of an anomaly for me because most of the libraries that I work with are on life support, for lack of a better term, and rely on the cash that I generate for them to supplement their needs. So again, Bill Library has been kind of an exclusion to a lot of the rules that I kind of adhere to. But again, they are both cash flow generating, managers. If you, not to jump around too much, but I mean, the portfolio, the average yield of the William Holton Memorial Fund is about 3.4% in terms of its equity dividend generating, cash flow. So it's a pretty decent yield, but again, it's kind of, interesting that the library doesn't use that. I mean, it's kudos to the Bill Library Association.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. And again, along the way, any questions, please feel free to interject. The second portfolio, again, that was a portfolio that I was sitting in Dime Bank in Ledyard on a Friday, and Nancy Avery walks in and says, "Hey, this is what's happening. We're looking to raise essentially a building fund with the intent that once the funds are received in and we've got what we need, we're going to take the money away from you and use it, for an expansion of the library." Of course, you flash forward now, but I don't remember, 15 years, and I still have the funds, and I'm waiting for that phone call. But again, that's how that account first started. And again, how we manage money is, we typically will ask the client, in this case, the library, what is the intent of the funds and when do you want it back from us? And from that, we kind of back into the manager that we use here at Janney. We kind of have what we call a stable approach, or some people call it a bullpen approach, where based on what a client says, we kind of marry a particular manager to what they're looking to accomplish. And regardless of that, the manager charges the same fee, whether it's Vanguard, whether it's BlackRock, whether it's West End or Schaefer Cullen. All in cost to the library is 0.75%, one for 1 year, There's no differential in the difference managers. They don't charge anything different. They're all the same management fee, and that's regardless of transactions. There's no individual transaction charges. I only mention that because over the course of time, and as we've gotten kind of more, long-term oriented for the building fund, we've actually transitioned this account on a couple of occasions. This account was originally invested with a manager called Russell Investments back in 2006. A couple of years later, once we kind of, survived, as they refer to it, the Great Recession, which was 2008 into 2009, we moved to Lippman Gregory, which was kind of a more active, more tactical manager, a manager that was willing to either increase equity or decrease equity based on their opinion. Whereas Russell was kind of consistent to a 60% equity, 40% bond model, kind of regardless. They really didn't shift gears, and they really underperformed into the Great Recession, which is why we decided to part ways with them. Now, as it seems like we're kind of more long-term oriented with this particular account, we shifted to West End Advisors, which is a more long-term oriented manager. But again, that's how I kind of position myself, is you let me know what the use of these funds are and when they'll be used, and we kind of back into a particular manager that might be a good fit for that. You can see year to date, West End Advisors is up about 7.07%. And again, where the William Holton Memorial Fund is about 90% equity, as we call it, the building fund is about 65% equity and about 35% bonds. Again, West End Advisors manages strictly using exchange traded funds, essentially indexes, and they'll kind of go out and find a particular index like a Treasury inflation protected security fund if they think inflation's coming. They'll invest in, short-term bonds if they think long-term bonds could be to a portfolio's detriment. So they have, as everybody might know, there's countless exchange traded funds that exist out there, kind of one for every person's desire. But that's how that account is currently managed by West End Advisors. They use an actively managed portfolio of exchange traded funds.
What's the other 20%? Or I'm 10%, I'm sorry. It said 55% equity, 35% bonds. That adds up to 80%. What's the other 10?
Yes, 65% equity.
Oh, okay.
And 35% bonds is how that model is kind of crafted. And again, they will go, the way that manager is set up, they will go as low as 50% equity or as high as 90% equity, depending on their opinion of the equity markets. So they are, again, very tactical in their approach. They're not just what we call a static money manager. They won't stay true to a 60% equity or stock, 40% bond allocation, no matter what. That was Russell, and that's where we kind of, the library kind of lost interest to Russell when we went through the 2008 and 2009 recession, as the market kept, if everybody recalls back then, the market seemingly went down quarter after quarter after quarter. And Russell really didn't, diverge in any way and dramatically underperformed as a result.
Okay.
The third account was kind of the last account to be established. And that was an account that I got a phone call, and the phone call basically said, hey, we're starting to get the prospect of gifts, individual gifts of securities that people want to donate to the library in lieu of cash. Can we do something? Absolutely. So we basically just set up a shell account, unmanaged. The money as it comes in, it's just sat there. There's shares of Coca-Cola. There's shares of a company called Parker Hannifin. There was a very nice gift of a Vanguard fund, and there about half of the account is in cash. And again, we've done nothing ever with that account. In fact, it was funny because the last time the commission was kind enough to allow me to speak. At that very meeting, we talked about the account, and I specifically said, let's get rid of Coca-Cola. And unfortunately, as Gail and I have been talking about, there's never really been an investment committee, which again is kind of an anomaly for Bill Library, which it sounds like we're finally righting that ship, which I'm excited about. Like I said, all libraries that I work with have an active investment committee that I usually meet with at a minimum quarterly. But at that time, the last time I met with the commission, I mentioned, we should probably look at getting rid of Coca-Cola, just because it has been a dead asset. And lo and behold, even today, it's at roughly the same price that it was the last time I was fortunate enough to speak in front of the commission. But again, that's an inactively managed account that probably should be addressed at some point in time, because it is, as you can see, $50,000 of assets. It's no small amount of money. Year to date, it's up about 3.9%. That's, through September 30th. And over the last year, it's up about, 17%. So it hasn't done bad. Most of that has to do with the Vanguard fund that's inside of it. Actually, a Vanguard fund that I actually use for some clients. But nevertheless, it is something that really needs to be looked at a little bit more closely.
Sal, can I ask you a question on that?
Yeah.
The individual stocks that are in that account, are they in a position of inordinate percentage of the account, in your opinion? Do we have too much money in one particular equity in that account? And should it be more diversified?
That's the present account that we're talking about?
Yeah, the present one, the one you said we're just letting sit there.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I'm actually in the account right now. So, the largest position, hands down, is Parker Hannifin. And again, that was a gift, and it just has sat there since it was gifted into the account. That position is the 15,972 of the account is worth 51,332 as of last night. So that position is 31% of that particular account.
Do you think that's a little bit high in your view?
Again, Harry, I'd love to know what the intention or desire is of that account, because it's never really, we've basically mapped out what the concept of the building fund was. We've mapped out what the William Holton Memorial Fund is. That third account, it was just set up to address gifts of securities, but no one's ever said, this is what this account should be used for. It should be used for periodic deposits to the library, or we've never really gone through an explanation or understanding, one that I'd love to be part of at some point.
Okay.
Sal and Harry, this is something I would like to look at with the investing committee, particularly for that account, and see if there is a way for us to tap into some income from that. But I think it's a decision we have to make down the road.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Okay.
as I mentioned, the first two accounts, because they are actively managed by third-party money managers, and even there, I'd love to meet with the investment committee and really determine, is West End still the most suitable manager? Is Schaefer Cullen still the most suitable manager? The third account, because it's basically just I'll call it a deposit account, it's just an account to receive in gifts of securities, is inactively managed, meaning no one is sort of watching the shop. Naturally, the last meeting I met with, I suggested we get rid of Coca-Cola, but then again, there I have to get the consent of the library to do so, where with Schaefer Cullen, if they think it's time to sell Bank of America, they're just going to go in and sell it. There's the difference.
Okay.
So again, that third account should definitely be addressed, not to mention the fact that it's got a considerable amount of cash, and unfortunately cash, as everybody might know, in money markets earns next to nothing right now.
1% if you're doing really well.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, again, any questions so far? The next couple of pages just, kind of goes back to what that very first page was all about. Page 4 is just an expansion of the asset allocation. That was on that first page we reviewed. Page 5 just, shows the top positions. But, again, to one thing that, we talked about is, how is this portfolio positioned? And if you look at page 5, some of the things I would highlight is the fact that if you look at page 5, it essentially shows how the library's equity positions are allocated in relation to the overall stock market. So if you look at the bottom left-hand corner, if everybody can see the word technology. I don't know if everybody can see that.
Yep.
On page 5. So essentially what that's saying is that if you look at the overall stock market, in this case, it's using the S&P 500, which essentially is the largest 500 publicly traded companies in the United States. About 25% of those companies by market size are technology companies, companies that we all know, Apple, Netflix, they call it Alphabet, but we all remember it as Google. That's technology. Comparatively, the library's equity assets are only about 11% in technology. That's done purposely. One, technology stocks, while they give much more opportunity for gain, tend to be much more volatile. And most technology companies do not pay dividends. So there's really no cash flow. You're kind of hoping on principal appreciation more than cash flow. Conversely, I always like to point out healthcare. And the reason why I point out healthcare, as you can see, the library has an overweight to healthcare compared to the overall stock markets. And it's kind of crass, so I apologize, but we always say even in bad times, people take their prescriptions, or at least we hope they do. And that's why there is an overweight to healthcare. There's an overweight to utility stocks. Even in bad times, people tend to turn their lights on. There's an overweight to consumer defensive. What would consumer defensive be? Consumer defensive is things like Procter & Gamble that make everything from Crest toothpaste to Tide laundry detergent. Hopefully, even in bad times, we brush our teeth and do our laundry. So there is a very defensive tone to the portfolio at this time. Schaefer Cullen, on the other hand, and that's the last thing I'll point out on this page, you can see financial services is a dramatic overweight. And you say, well, why is that? Financial services like Bank of America, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley are very interest rate sensitive in that bank stocks, financially related stocks tend to benefit from rising interest rates. Having a bank background, I can tell you firsthand, as interest rates rise, banks are very reluctant to increase your deposit rates, but are only too happy to pass along rising interest rates in the form of higher mortgages. So typically speaking, in a rising interest rate environment, bank stocks tend to do very well and have done very well, and is partially why they're up 17% year to date, Schaefer Cullen. So that's why there is that dramatic overweight at this time. It's kind of a hedge to the prospect of rising interest rates. The last page, page 6. And this goes back to a conversation Harry and I were having. Cash flow. If you look at page 6, you can see that the free cash flow of the portfolio over the next year will essentially generate $28,000, meaning if all these positions are held for the next year, this portfolio generates about $28,000. Most of that coming from Schaefer Cullen, most of that coming from the William Holton Memorial Fund, as that portfolio is focused on cash flow generation. Again, a lot of the libraries I work with rely on that cash flow. It's great that Bill Library hasn't needed that cash flow, but again, it's there should the library need it. Any other questions or thought about the portfolio summary, or any questions about, any aspect of how we're overseeing these managers? Again, we kind of use, as we call it, a stable approach, or, this time of year, we'll call it a bullpen approach. We've got a lot of pitchers warming up in the bullpen, and maybe we'll use one based on what the library tells us we should use, and we can hire and fire them at will. And regardless of that, each manager charges 0.75% per year to the library, with the exception of that third account, because again, it's presently not being overseen by an active manager.
Who would you suggest if we were to have a manager for that account? Who would you recommend?
Yeah, and again, it goes back to the idea of what is the long-term desire for that money. And again, where I sort of run into trouble in determining, who the most appropriate manager is we all have personal opinions about how assets should be allocated, because we come, saddled with personal knowledge of inflation, personal knowledge of what's happening out there in the economy. The reality is that when it comes to a library, when it comes to a charity, when it comes to, you name the entity, the theory is that the investment time horizon for that entity is forever. You think about Bill Library, and Gail, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the library was created in the late 1800s, 1893 or something. I mean, you think about that. So essentially, I'm sorry?
Actually, it started 1867. The
Okay.
building was 1893.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so you think about that. So the library has survived what, 2 world wars, 5 pandemics. We're in the 5th one, of course, but 5 pandemics. It's survived, 1 Great Depression, 1 Great Recession, 20 recessions. And our goal and desire should be to see to it that these assets last long enough to allow the library to survive the next 2 world wars and, 5 next pandemics, because essentially that's the history of the world. So we kind of have to disassociate our personal opinion of, inflation and the economy slowing, because the grim reality is that we want this library to be around forever. So allocation needs to be sort of rethunk in this interest rate environment. That's why if you notice there's a slight overweight to equity and an underweight to bonds, because conceptually that's where potential has to be found. And again, so that third account, again, I'd love to hear what the commission wants to achieve with that money. If it's a high degree of cash flow, again, we can look to one manager. If it's just consistent, balanced return, we can look to another manager. Again, we have countless money managers at our fingertips. If you saw, we have a document that I sent about the initial screening. So we have 6,000 different managed accounts. West End Advisors themselves has 5 different portfolios. So we have access to countless resources, and based on what the commission tells me they're looking to accomplish with that particular portfolio, we can have an active manager come in and for 0.75% rearrange that portfolio and essentially manage that money in a way that the commission would like.
Isn't it, Sal, is now the time to be doing that with the market so high?
Well, again, I mean, you look at, we talked about just that one position in Parker Hannafin alone being 1/3 of the account. I mean, that's what we would refer to as a concentrated position. So again, based on management selection and based on what we're looking to accomplish with that money, we're just talking about diversifying the money. Diversifying the money could be in a more defensive manner. It could be in a more aggressive manner, but ultimately it comes down to what the commission's looking to achieve with the money. And again, we all are coming to this meeting today with the thought process that the stock market's near all-time highs. It is, but you know what? for the 22 years I've been a financial advisor, I can't tell you how many times the stock market hit fresh all-time highs. I remember at one point the stock market crossing above and below 10,000 for the Dow. And we thought that was mind-blowing, the idea that the Dow crossed 10,000. You know, my company at that time, Payne Weber, you know, gave out Dow 10,000 hats. We were like, this is unforeseen. 10,000 for the Dow. We're at 35,000 today, 22 years later, you know? So, you know, again, we kind of have to take our personal opinions about, you know, if you and I are sitting down as individuals, that's a different story, because you have an investment time horizon, you want to retire, you want to live off your assets. Conceptually, the library has no time horizon, and that's how we kind of have to think of it. We kind of have to disassociate our personal, you know, fears and greeds and just focus on the idea of trying to sustain the library forever. And unfortunately, that takes a little bit of risk. It does, because put all the money in 10-year government bonds. As everybody knows, we're going to get what, 1.6% per year for 10 years. That doesn't even match inflation. Put all the money in a bank deposit, and, you know, essentially we're running backwards, you know, not making anything essentially. So again, investing this money doesn't mean putting 100% in the stock market. What it means is diversifying it, just like we did with the William Holton Memorial Fund. You know, when that money came in, I mean, 40% of it was IBM. Look what happened to IBM since then. I mean, it has, if we just left it in IBM, we'd be in trouble. You know, GE since 2017 has been, you know, beaten, battered, and bruised. So the idea of diversification, of diversifying assets means, you know, taking it from the few positions that it is presently, you know, Parker Hannifin, Coca-Cola, and a mutual fund, and just broadening it out. That William Holton Memorial Fund went from 4 stocks to 42. And that's all we're talking about, is the idea that, you know, diversifying doesn't necessarily put it all in the stock market. It just broadens out the risk posture of the portfolio.
I think, Sal, what I'd like to recommend is that the committee get together and discuss ideas on what we want to do. And perhaps the committee should meet again with you and come up with a recommendation that we can bring back to the commission, the full commission, to approve. Does that sound feasible?
Sounds good. I think we have to, we can look at the building fund as money that can only be used for the building.
There's restrictions on that for sure, yeah,
Right.
yes,
So that's being actively managed. So
yes.
unless we're upset with the advisor that we have now, then there's really no need to do anything with that, but you're gonna talk to us about that.
Correct.
The Holton Fund is being actively managed, and that's supposed to be used for the building, but we can also use it if we want to for other things. But the last one, the $50,000 fund, that's the fund that we're going to be spending money from.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah, because, you know, the budget, the town budget has been under a lot of pressure for a number of years. So we need to, suppose we need to keep some cash or to keep it liquid, but I still think it should be managed.
Well, even if
That's my view.
even if it's managed, and correct me, Sal, if I'm wrong, even if it's managed and we need something, we can get it, correct?
Correct.
Oh, absolutely. It's just a phone call. You know, how I operate with most of the libraries that I work with is their, you know, investment account with me is attached to their operating account at, you know, their local bank. And, you know, with today's Monday, if the library were to call today, you know, during normal business hours and say, hey, listen, we need $10,000. We ask the manager to raise the funds, 10,000. They typically settle in 2 days and they're in the account on the third day, meaning Thursday. So it's a very quick turnaround. We just do a direct deposit right into the library's operating fund. So turnaround for liquidations is very quick.
So we don't need to really, unless there's a big variation in the market, we don't need a lot of cash. We can put it in equities or whatever. to manage
Yeah,
it.
again, there's, and again, I would love to help the library, craft even so much as like an investment policy statement, which I'm
Yes.
not familiar with if Bill Library even has yet. I've done that. I've helped other libraries craft those in the past. And from that, we determine, again, Bill Library is very fortunate. I work with libraries that aren't. I work with libraries that depend on my direct deposit on the first of every month. And in those scenarios, what we typically do is earmark, usually about 6 months worth of those direct deposits held aside in cash, just sitting in an idle account, not managed, just sitting there. And this way we know that hypothetically, we could go 6 months without having to liquidate anything if we felt it was necessary to hold off on it, But again, those are all things that we can kind of hash out together. And again, maybe at some point craft an investment policy for the Bill Library.
Good idea.
John, I think it would be up to the committee and the commission to determine what kind of a reasonable estimate of periodic needs of that money is.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think that's our challenge,
Yep.
Yes.
because Sal will need that in order to craft an appropriate portfolio for us, which would include some cash reserve, as he's may have just described.
Mhm,
Sure.
correct.
When are you available to meet?
Pretty much you give me a day and a time and I'm there. I spend, I live and work in Rhode Island, but in a weird twist, 90% of my clients are in southeastern Connecticut because of my career with Dime Bank. So I'm down in Ledyard tomorrow, but just saying I'm down there frequently. So simply, whatever the investment committee can agree upon, don't think of me as the pivot person. Just tell me the day and time that you all agree upon and I'll be there.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the presentation too. Are there any other questions? Okay, no, that was really helpful. Thank you very much. And sorry we went so long having you come visit because that was really, really helpful.
No, happy to. Again, I apologize because I can be long-winded. So for that, I do apologize.
Well, we hadn't heard from you for quite a few years, so you can go as long as you want tonight. Next year we won't cut you the same break.
I appreciate that.
All right.
Let me see
So-
if I can get the agenda up on the screen.
Okay.
Do you guys
And
want me to? Do you guys want me to sign out now?
If you want to stay, you're welcome to, but I wouldn't blame you for wanting to disappear. So,
No, I appreciate everybody's time. And again, please, call me. Like I said, use me, use Janie as a resource. I mentioned we charge the library a fee. Outside of that fee, there's no individual charges for the creation of an investment policy for any of that stuff. So lean on us, use us as a resource.
thank you.
And,
I think we will be doing that very soon.
Fantastic. And with that, I'll go make my wife some tea.
Perfect. Have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
all. Take care.
Thanks, Sal.
Thank you.
All right. While Gail's getting the screen sharing going,
Did that work? Do you have the agenda?
No,
You don't
no,
have
it's not up there.
it? Okay.
Cheryl, I wanted to give you a heads up too. Kent came into the meeting. It's just the way the windows show up, I didn't see it, but if you want to make sure you add that. for
I did,
the
got
roll
it.
call.
Yep,
Okay,
got it.
awesome. And welcome. I can do the meeting with it not up if you're having trouble with it.
Yeah, I don't know why it isn't showing because I had it on my screen. But if you
Yeah,
don't,
no worries at all. All right, so jumping into our regular meeting, if I could get a motion to approve the meeting minutes from our last meeting, September 20th, 2021.
So moved.
Okay, that was John moved. Could I get a second?
Second,
That was
Brian.
Brian seconding. Thank you so much. Any discussion, corrections, or anything on those? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone? Sorry, any opposed or abstentions? Okay, it passes unanimously. Thank you. Gail, is there any correspondence?
no, just what we had from Sal that we looked at tonight.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm gonna ask Carol to do the treasurer's report and just also know that under old business, I'm still gonna ask the question of if someone will think about stepping forward to take over that role starting in, I believe you said January.
Thank you for
Okay, so again, people, if we can keep that,
thinking about it.
it will come up again in this meeting, so. But Carol, your report,
Okay.
and say it with a smile, you know, people want to be this role. You know, so- I said, say it with a smile, so people want to take on this role.
That's right. It's so much fun, but I do feel like I should get someone else. If you look at this month's report, the report side, as opposed to the spreadsheet, it is set up the normal way and wouldn't look unusual. But when you look over to the spreadsheet side, you might notice that it doesn't balance. The balance available is not the same as the balance less, let's see, balance less investment. We are not comparing to the bank statement anymore. It had gotten, as you are aware, the last few months, it was harder and harder to use the bank statement as a way to check the figures, because sometimes things were spent during the month, and yes, they were paid by the town during the month, but it didn't take it out of the bank until the next month, and they were in varying combinations. You couldn't really even tell which ones they represented, and decided to just no longer try to balance it with the bank and use the town's account, the balance that they provide in their accounting of our special funds. If that still doesn't quite balance, because we haven't really figured out exactly what things need to be added into it. I mean, I thought that, well, the interest is probably not in it because that shows up on the bank, but that's not something the town would have allocated. But Gail said she believes it is in there. So we have to spend another month and take a closer look at exactly what figures are going into the town's bottom line for the account versus where we stand. And it may just be that we carryover was figured differently, or they're listing different things. I'm just really not sure at this point, but we do have, you know, the ins and outs of the account. Is the income that came, the expenditures, and they are a little bit more accurate because we didn't have to wait until it was taken out of the bank to list them. So now they're with the right month, but it's going to take a little more work before we can actually come up with permanent system for matching, you know, comparing the figures. So there's about a $4,000 discrepancy between the total balance that let's see, that we have minus when it says less investment, that's talking about the Gales Ferry books money that's in the bank. And that doesn't show up on the town books. That's why there's the $33,872 balance on hand. That includes those books. But apparently there are some other things that are included or not included. Is it the interest? Is it the accumulated interest? Is it some other things? We still have some figuring out to do. I can't understand the system.
So Carol, I spoke with Ian today,
Oh,
and
good.
part of the problem is the town has not closed out the books yet for last
Wow.
year. So the revenues are not accurate. He
So
also,
the carryover things and so forth aren't going to match what we said the carryover was.
right,
Okay,
And
well,
the other thing is, he told me he's always a month behind on the income. He hasn't done October yet. It's
so we're including the
I mean,
income on
Yes,
our.
he hasn't done September yet.
But
Supposedly,
we are catching up with the outgo because he's
supposedly it gets done this week. And I said, to let me know when it's done, because then I can go into the reports and see how we are faring to what they have for income.
sure they match what they're calling our income. Because we
Yeah.
want to get credit for all of it.
So he does definitely have interest, though. I can see
Okay,
it.
good. That's the minor part, but that's
Yes.
good to know. It'll help balance it to know that. So it's a work in progress. And with a lot of help from Gail. What little I understand is because she cleared it up for me.
No, it's been a chore trying to figure out. He does things very different from the last treasurer, and he admitted he does it differently because he wants every department done the same way. And it's
Different departments have different
Yeah.
circumstances and purposes for their funds, but I mean, and I'm sure ours is more actively used than some of the commissions. They have some funds in their special account, but they probably are not using it as actively as the library.
Parks and Rec and the Senior Center have a
Sure.
similar situation.
But some of the others really wouldn't be.
No,
So we will continue to try to straighten out a way of comparing our version of the books and their version of the books. But we are providing you every month with what actually has come in and gone out. So you have that record.
So, any questions that haven't already been answered? All right, so we accept it, subject to audit and all that good stuff. Moving on, directors, and thank you. And moving on, directors report.
okay. I'm pleased to let you know, I hired Andrea Holbrook to replace Elaine Steele at Gales Ferry. And she's Andrea as opposed to Andrea. Andrea has a background in education and is currently the director of a small library in South Wyndham. She will begin her work here on November 1st. Please be sure to stop by and say hello. We've struggled the past 2 months keeping the library staffed with the full-time vacancy on top of vacations and staff illnesses. It will be nice to have a full contingent of staff again. We just had a very interesting presentation from Sal, and I'd like to recommend that the investment committee continue their work on library investments. I would like to establish some policies for the funds in terms of investing and possibly using some of them or income from them. we may want to consider taking some of the donated funds to supplement cuts made to our budget, particularly for library materials. This year has been difficult because without the fall book sale, the Friends have a smaller budget to work with. And I'm just going to add right now, I just received a check for $2,000 from the Martha Perry estate that came in. And this came in after I did the agenda. I'd like to recommend that we put this $2,000 in the Friends budget to help cover Hoopla. I'm working on their budget for next year, and because they haven't had a book sale, I'm short in funds to cover Hoopla. So if we can add that as a motion under new business, that would be great. The East Lyme Library Foundation has recently been used to supplement their book budget. Each year, the library receives a check from the interest on the funds. Otis Library in Norwich has an endowment with several separate invested funds, some restricted and some not. They also receive an annual check from the funds. Otis is considered an association library rather than a municipal library, so their board has full control of the funds. And this is something I'd like to look at, particularly for that smaller fund that we have. Taking maybe an amount each year based on the interest that we receive. And again, I think that the committee should look at that and come back to the commission with a recommendation. Under library news, the library staff continue to plan programs for the community, and we've been slowly moving back to indoor events along with Zoom programs. Next month, we are co-sponsoring a program with 7 area libraries on indigenous seeds. Each library will contribute to the fee, and we hope to reach a wide audience. The program, Seeds for 7 Generations with Diane Wilson, will be on Zoom Saturday, November 20th at 1 p.m. Story times have worked well outdoors, but are proving a little more difficult inside. Stacy is making adjustments as needed for the group size when the programs are held indoors. And I think we're going to need to see more of them indoors now that the weather has turned cold. Under building news, the new phone system has been installed at the library, and we're learning to make use of all the features. The system is easy to use, and since it is the same as the one at Gales Ferry Library, we're able to set them both alike, which helps for staff going back and forth. And that is my report.
Well, thank you very much, Gail. Any questions for Gail? Okay, moving on to committee reports. John, do you have anything from the Friends?
Just that the Friends are working on the books and more for November. And so if you have any donations that you'd like to make to the Friends to create baskets or whatever, Linda DeRose is the one that's sort of putting it all together. Other than that, that's my report.
There's a meeting this week on Thursday,
That's right, yeah. Thursday,
6 o'clock, 7 o'clock for general.
right.
Thank you.
We always get huge turnout from the members. If we get 1 or 2, that's a lot.
So we could like break records by all showing up, but we wouldn't know what to
I'd
do.
love to have you.
Yeah, well. Any questions for John about the Friends or Gail? Okay. Committee reports from investment committee, and actually, I just want to, even before you give any sort of report and before we get to the motion, I just want to thank everyone who has worked on this because I really feel like we're making great progress, and I know you guys stepped forward, did it, and scrambled and did a lot in a very short period of time. So thank you. So with that is our report from the investment committee.
We haven't met, so there really isn't a report. But I'd like to ask the
Okay.
members, John, Carol, Cheryl, and Harry, if you're willing to continue to meet.
I was gonna ask that too.
Has the Bill Library Association approved the change in the memorandum of understanding?
They haven't met yet. They meet next week. Um,
Okay,
I'd like to have the committee meet Monday or Tuesday, November 1st or 2nd at 10 or later in the afternoon if that works better. Julie, I can't hear you.
Yeah, Harry, I think you're muted.
I'll be out of town through the 1st of November. I'll probably be coming in around 1 or 2 o'clock on November 2nd. So I don't know what good I'll be if you have an early meeting on the 2nd. I won't be available on the 1st, and I'm sorry, the 2nd's probably a bad idea for me.
Well, we could do the 3rd. I'm flexible.
That would be fine. That would be fine with me.
Okay,
Be okay with me.
okay. Phil?
November 3rd, it's fine with me.
The later, the better for me.
Okay, do we want to do a 2 o'clock or a 3 o'clock?
That's good.
Did you
Say
say
that again?
What time, Cheryl?
3's good. 3's fine.
Okay, 3 o'clock on November 3rd
At the library, at Bill?
at Bill.
Let me check a calendar.
Okay.
Actually, you guys really are the best. Thank you. I so thoroughly appreciate you jumping into something that was supposed to be really short term and then agreeing to stay onto it. It was not an intentional thing, but it's really appreciated. So thank you. Harry, were you able to check your calendar? You think
Yes,
you're good or?
November 3rd is fine with me.
Okay, 3 o'clock then. All right, thank you.
All right, so we're gonna get to the motion for you guys to continue. It's a little disjointed, but we'll do that under new business. First of all, old business. Again, I want to make my ask for someone to step up as treasurer. I'm not opposed to sending out emails and harassing everyone as well, as some of you know full well. But if you're even thinking that it might be interesting, or if you're a good human being and willing to do it, it would be great. And especially the earlier you step forward, maybe we could have some transition time with, Carol sharing with you what she's doing, so she's not staying on longer than she was hoping to, especially because she's doing the stuff with the investment
If
subcommittee.
anybody wants to
So,
ask me questions about it, I'd be glad to talk about it with either email or phone or something.
yeah, well, thank you. And, it's, from what I've heard, it's a learning curve, but we're also, there are some bugs in it with a new person, but that'll all get smoothed out, and it needs to happen. We need a
Not much
person.
time each month, actually.
Yeah,
sometimes
that,
heavy
not much time. If you want a really big role, not a lot of time. All right, that's my begging. I will also harass Barbara, attempting to volunteer her when she's not here, but I will not do that, but I might next month. So everyone beware and make sure you show up for meetings. Again, and if anyone's interested, if anyone wants to talk to me offline, talk to Carol or talk to Gail, please, I would really welcome that. All right, so new business. If I could get a motion, a recommendation for the investment, are we calling it the investment committee or a subcommittee or ad hoc committee?
Don't be ad hoc. I think it's the term.
Okay, so the investment, that, I remember it being the ad hoc investment subcommittee, to continue meeting to consider policy or policies for the library commission investments. So some
Roll call.
variation thereof. All right, John moved. If I could get a second.
Second.
Was that, Ralph, second? Okay, thank you. Any discussion about it or questions? Other than what the name of it is?
Just a basic housekeeping question. 3 o'clock at the library?
Yes,
Okay.
Awesome, easy question. That's great. Thank you, Harry. All right, so, all right, all in favor? Say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right, motion passes, and, thank you for the people who are on it, not opposing the continued service, which would be tempting, I know. All right. Oh, also, if under new business, if I could get a motion about using that $2,000 gift, sending that to the Friends budget for Hoopla.
That money is not restricted?
No, no, it's not.
I'm not really following what's, somebody's giving us money, right?
So,
So are we giving money to the Friends? Is that
no,
what you're suggesting?
this is money from the estate of Martha Perry for Ledger Library. And I'm asking to use it for Hoopla. And since the Friends have an established, what do I want to say? They have been funding Hoopla. But for next year, because they haven't had the book sale, they don't have enough funds in the budget to cover Hoopla. So I'd like to use that $2,000 to supplement what the Friends have for Hoopla.
So it's not going to the Friends, it's just for using money for something the Friends previously supported, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so we're not
Okay,
giving.
yeah, sorry, I
Friends
just said that.
money. Okay,
But instead of the library picking it up to pay, you're just giving the funds then to the Friends so they can continue in hopes that that will continue in the future. It's just that they need funding this year. Is
Right,
that what you're saying?
exactly.
well, what the Friends approve every year is a recommendation from Gail on how to spend the previous year's profit, so it's not really, it's Gail's recommendation that they vote on.
Well, who's actually paying that bill? Is it coming right from the Friends normally? And then we can leave that pattern in place, or do the Friends give the money to the library to then pay it anyway?
No, the Friends pay the bill
Friends pay it.
Pay it,
Yeah.
okay.
each
So
month.
In this case, we're paying it.
Well, yeah, but it makes sense to me to make up that difference since we have this windfall, so to speak, and it's a program that I gather.
I just wanted to clarify that we're not giving money to the Friends. We're spending money that the Friends would normally spend, but they can't because they haven't raised the money.
Correct.
So it would be coming directly out of the library budget to Hoopla, not by way of the Friends. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Well,
Who's gonna pay it?
no, what would happen is I would probably have to discontinue Hoopla because I don't have the money in my budget or your budget and the Friends budget to cover it. But by
We can use that money. But we hang on to it and use it for Hoopla then,
Yes.
yeah,
not
Well-
really by way of the Friends. That's what's confusing me.
Will the $2,000 bridge the gap between what the Friends need to fund Hoopla Or is that not enough?
I'm hoping it will. I haven't finished doing the budget yet, but I believe it will cover it. I already supplement part of it from my regular book budget because Hoopla is expensive, and the cost goes according to the usage, and the community loves it. They're using it, so the cost is there, and it ups our circulation. It's downloadable ebooks, audiobooks, movies, music. There's a whole host of things that are included. And
So Gail, if you got a motion to use the gift to offset the cost of Hoopla, would that straighten out the whole confusion about who's actually writing the check?
yeah, it might, yes. Because that's what it's going to be for, is Hoopla. That's what I want the money used for.
And it was given to the library.
Yeah,
Right.
yep, made out to Ledger Library.
So it's in our regular library commission account, right?
No, I
Is
haven't
that-
done anything. I have the check. I haven't deposited the check.
So will it go into our account?
I would like to have the friends deposit it right to their account.
It's not made out to them, right? It's made out to the,
Is that okay with the donor?
Library is
Give it to the friends?
the one to take it.
Okay.
It could go to either one.
Um,
On the other hand, when I do it for the investment, I'd have to contact them to write the check out to their library association. Because they can't take a check that says Ledger Library.
If we put it in there and then wanted to take it out and use it for that,
Right.
we can
Right.
simpler than that if we're gonna do this.
Right,
I'm still confused about whether whose account it's going into to get paid, but Hoopla is usually paid with funds from the Friends, but it's part of actually the book line of the town's library budget. Is that true?
I supplement it from the regular book budget because,
But that's the category it fits into.
yes, yes.
And you supplement it with money from the Friends,
Well, the friends pay the bulk of it
right?
each year. But because the costs have gone up because of usage, I supplement it from the regular book budget. And
Okay,
we have
sorry, go ahead.
a need for the funds. I just thought if we could just put it directly into the Friends for Hoopla, that would take care of that.
And the donor's okay with that?
It, to Ledger Library, there's no restriction. And basically, it's
And it
materials.
was from an estate, right? So there's not really anyone to ask. Is that accurate?
It's a big quest. It's not an in memoriam, right?
Right,
It came out of her estate at her
Right,
direction,
right.
which is gone.
But I don't, like I said, there are no restrictions on how you use it.
so I think it's a
No,
good
no,
idea.
Go ahead, Cheryl, sorry.
I think it's a good idea because of COVID to make an exception to do this year. But where I have a concern is stuff that you discussed in your director's report, Gail, where you were looking to be able to use some of the investment funds to supplement the library's budget. And this is where I have a little bit of a concern because I think it becomes a slippery slope where our budget continues to get cut annually and the salaries continue to be challenged annually and the staffing and the hours and everything continue to be challenged annually. And if we start putting a precedent that we're going to start funding stuff that the town has funded historically, then we're going in the wrong direction. So I guess in conclusion, I agree that because of COVID, it's a good idea to supplement Hoopla however we have to do it. But I'm very concerned about what you were requesting in your director's report to offset money that the town isn't providing for the library from investments that that people are contributing to the library for special things.
Rebecca, can I
Yep.
point out, I had sent to Gail this afternoon the report on the dime balances, and you have, under the commission, I have no idea how this thing was set up. There's about $13,000 of commission money sitting in the Dime Bank checking account that I've set up. So you may want to consider that.
Okay,
I think,
Gail, help me out. Is that the money that we can't touch? No.
Oh, that money is, just as an example, that money was used to pay for the tax preparation in prior years, about $1,360 a year. As far as I know, when I took over as in the association treasurer, there were 4 or 5 passbooks that I have, at least 4 of them, I have consolidated into a statement, savings, and a checking account. And Gail has, I think, some additional funds, and I'm hoping that we can sort out or set up something that's going to be more rational in terms of the money she has. I think, Gail, you have money for Gail's Ferry and so.
yep,
But I just wanted to point out, for your discussion that to the best of my knowledge, there's almost 13,000. I don't know if Gail sent that around to you, to the rest of the, okay.
no, I didn't. But that, again, I think comes under the investing committee discussions.
Yeah, that's the fund number 3, as Sal was explaining them, right? This is the gifts.
Oh,
fund.
No, this is in addition to
Part of
that, right?
yes, it's part of that. I think we need to look at that and see. do we
Right, but
make-
that's something we'll be discussing. for
Right,
future.
right.
let me clarify that those monies are not under Sal's direction. They are sitting in the Dime Bank.
There's
They're the ones that are there under sort of the administration of the association. They're the ones that you're holding for the commission, correct? That's
They
totally
are.
separate from the dime account that the library commission has. That's a different thing.
No, Carol, they're in addition to, they're
It's separate from the account that I've used to balance.
but they're library commission as opposed to the library association. But they're in
Not
Dime
the association funds, but they're being held by them. Right.
They're in Dime Bank, not with Gianni,
Right,
is what Ken's saying.
but Kent's putting them there, not the library commission treasurer or director.
Right, right,
These are things of those 3 accounts that will be discussed.
yep,
The gift one, the special account. So that's different than the accounts we're talking about relative to this donation. It would never get put into that one.
well, it would have gone into one of those accounts.
But if we use it to pay for Hoopla, we wouldn't even deposit into that.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm asking, is to use it for hoopla.
And Kate, were you asking if if we should use some of those funds that you're talking about to offset the rest of the costs, or are we just bringing up that we have those funds and we need to know what we're doing with them?
I just wanted to inform the commission that those monies were there. I have no idea of their source, except they existed on 3 passbook savings accounts that were identified as being commission accounts. And I consolidated those into a combination checking, a small amount in a checking account and the rest in a savings at the Dime Bank.
Okay, all right, yeah, let me, at some point I can talk with Gail about that, or the investment committee can talk about that. Let's just, if people don't mind, go back to the motion about how to use this gift. But I mean, thank you for that information. That's,
Is there a motion on the floor?
Yeah,
I'm trying to get one there. It's not quite there. All right, so basically I'm asking for a motion to use this $2,000 gift to offset the cost of Hoopla.
Yeah, keeping it simple like that without the mechanics of how it's gonna work probably makes sense. So do you need a motion or are you making a motion?
I think I need one.
I so moved.
I'll second it.
Okay, can I get it? Awesome, thank you both. Any additional discussion on this?
I have a question, Rebecca, and that is, it seems to me, if I understood correctly, that what we want to do is to use this money to offset what the Friends would have contributed to Hoopla, and not as a result of the town not providing us enough funds to cover Hoopla. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah,
It's because of the COVID causing the Friends to have insufficient funds this year for that. It doesn't have to do with the town dropping their what they're providing.
It's not anything the town has ever funded. So
That's
it's
fine.
funded by
I
the-
understand. I just wanted clarification because that was part of the stream of information that had been offered up to this point. Okay, I just want to clarify that. Thank you.
yeah, no, I appreciate that, because I think we have sort of like 3 sort of streams going simultaneously. That's why I want to sort of get the $2,000 check figured out. And I think, Cheryl's point, which I think you're echoing right now, about, like using our investments to offset things that the town stopped paying for, that's something there's concern, and right, it should certainly be discussed. So I think that's something else, but I think that's different than the Hoopla thing. And then I think Kent's point is an extremely good one too, that we have this other fund that we need to be knowledgeable about.
Mhm.
So separating those out, just the $2,000 gift. Any other questions, discussion, comments? Or all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Anyone opposed or abstain? Okay, so that passes unanimously. Are we good talking about the other funds through the investment committee or separately, since we don't have that information for this evening's meeting? I just want to make sure it doesn't feel like it's being brushed under, but I do want to get a little bit more information before we try to discuss that. Okay, so with that, I want to thank Cheryl very much for stepping up and taking the minutes, because that's always a challenge and very much appreciated. And if I can get a motion to adjourn until our next meeting on November 15th at 7 o'clock on Zoom. All right, I think I got from Carol, and then Brian, did you move or second?
I can. Second.
Sure, I'm sorry, I heard noise come out of, like, your box lit up, so you'll be the second on that, thank you. All right, with that, I adjourn the meeting at 8:25, and I thank all of you for being here and for the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Have a good week.
Okay, good
Thank
night.
you.
Yeah, thanks, you too.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.